If you would, turn in your Bibles to Mark chapter 11. Mark chapter 11. And in the Gospel of Mark, it's really going to shift here the focus, right? Mark has been one of the quickest of the Gospels. Jesus is going place to place to place to place very, very quickly. And here in the last chapters 11 through 16, it's really going to slow down to the last week of Jesus' life, which is great for us as we prepare for the Easter, for our Easter season. And so, we are there in Mark chapter 11, and what we're going to see today is a lot of what we saw last week and the week before that, and the week before that, is that we serve a crucified king, and that Jesus, and here's the main point, Jesus both exceeds our expectations of being a king. He's a better king than we can imagine, but he also flips those expectations on their head. For he's not just a king, he is a crucified king, one that dies in our place. So Jesus here both exceeds expectations and flips them on their head. And we're going to see this in three ways today. That he exceeds and flips the expectations through his kingship, through his curses, and through his cleansing. Kingship, curses, and cleansing. If you notice there, it all has the CK sound, even if they don't all have the same starting letter. All right, so there's a little English. There's an English word for that acronym. No. Alliteration. Thank you. I was looking at some teachers here. Need some help. Kingship, curses, and cleansing. If you're taking notes there. And so, if you're there, Mark chapter 11, we're going to start in verse 1, and this is what it says. Now, when they drew near to Jerusalem, to Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the village in front of you, and immediately as you enter it, you will find a colt tied, on which no one has ever sat. Untie it and bring it. If anyone says to you, 'Why are you doing this?' say, 'The Lord has need of it, and will send it back here immediately.' And they went away and found a colt tied at a door outside in the street, and they untied it. And some of those standing there said to them, 'What are you doing untying the colt?' And they told them what Jesus had said, and they let him go. And they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. And many spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut from the field. And those who went before and those who followed were shouting, 'Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the highest.' And Jesus entered Jerusalem and went into the temple. And when he had looked around at everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. We're going to cover this whole passage here, but this is known as the triumphant entry. And this entry of Jesus coming into the town of Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, and people laying down their cloaks, waving the palm branches, and him coming, and everyone saying, 'Hosanna, praise be to God. Hosanna is he who's bringing the kingdom of the Lord here with us.' It's a celebratory event, one that Jesus has prepared for. And this was culturally appropriate at that time. A king, oftentimes, when he came back home, back into his town, publicly, he would be hailed and cheered by the crowds. And Jesus does what is expected of a king. He comes, people celebrate, the good king is home. He's safe from his adventures, but he also flips it on his head. Jesus comes not riding a stallion, coming with an army. He comes with 12 disciples, and he comes riding on a donkey, something fit for a child. And yet, he's doing this intentionally. He's there fulfilling a prophecy from Zechariah chapter 9 that says, "Praise be to the Lord who comes," and there's fanfare, and he comes riding on a donkey, on a colt. But Jesus did not only fulfill the prophecy, but also because he alone is able to exceed that expectation and flip them on their head. We know that Jesus has prepared for this moment because he tells his disciples, go into the town, and there's going to be a donkey tied up there, and someone's going to ask you, why are you stealing my donkey? And they're going to say, the Lord has need of it. Jesus has prepared for this time, for this moment. And so they bring him back to him. So Jesus has been doing this all throughout the Gospel of Matthew or Mark, that he sets the expectation and says, this is how you want to do it, and flips it on its head. He asked the disciples earlier, do you want to be great? Oh, well, of course, Jesus, I want to be great. Well, then serve. Do you want to be first? Well, then be last. Do you want to be better? Then serve others. Don't think about yourself. And we've seen that this is Jesus, not only here in the Gospel of Matthew, but this is really the gospel of Jesus throughout the whole Scriptures. We were told in the Garden of Eden that there is going to become one from the line of Adam and Eve that will crush the head of the serpent. There's going to be a snake crusher that comes. And we expect that it to happen right away. If you remember the story, Adam and Eve have 2 sons, and neither of them are the serpent crusher. And if we look at the end of the story of the Bible, we get the book of Revelation, and maybe the most consistent or obvious flipping expectations on their head is when John first gets into heaven. And he's just in awe of this God who is sitting on the throne. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Seraphim and cherubim are praising him. But there's a little bit of worry. There's these scrolls that need to be opened, and nobody is worthy to open them. If you remember the story, and what goes on is that John, he weeps, but they say, don't. There's a Lion of Judah, the Son of David. He is able to open them. And he gets excited. He says, yes. And he hears the lion. And he says he turns and looks and sees a lamb. And John is showing us that God is revealing that Jesus is both the Lion of Judah, all powerful, all king, but he's also the Lamb of God. So in Jesus, we find infinite majesty, yet complete humility. Perfect justice, yet boundless grace. Absolute sovereignty, yet utter submission. We find all sufficiency in himself, yet entire trust and dependence upon God. Jesus exceeds expectations and yet flips them on his head as the right king. He is better than we could ever imagine. He's better than King David, who is the king of all kings in the Old Testament. And yet he is humble and rides on a donkey. And when he comes to Jerusalem, he comes, he looks, he sees the temple, but it's already late, so he goes back. And then we get to the second part, that Jesus both exceeds expectations and flips them on their head, not only in his kingship, but on his curses. So what happens is, I'm just going to kind of summarize and tell the story, is that Jesus, the next morning, comes from Bethany, goes back to Jerusalem, and on the way, he sees a fig tree, and he says, let's go see what fruit, if they have any figs on there, or anything to eat. And there's nothing there. And he curses the fig tree. The disciples are a little confused, but all right, whatever. Jesus goes on into Jerusalem. He comes to the temple, and he immediately begins to drive out all those that sold pigeons and animals and everyone who was in the temple at that time. He overturned tables, money changers, and he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. And he says, is it not written that my house shall be called a house of prayer? But you have made it into a den of robbers. And the chief priests and the scribes heard all this, and they decided, okay, enough of this Jesus, we have to kill him. And as they were leaving Jerusalem the next morning, they see the fig tree, and it's all withered to its roots. And it's gone, and they're in astonishment. And Jesus tells them, why do you doubt? But believe what I say, and will come to pass. Ask whatever you want in prayer, and believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. So the fig tree is kind of a weird story that we know, but may not know why. But the Gospel of Mark does this thing where he sandwiches a story in between two stories, right? So we got the cursing of the fig tree, says it in the morning, he goes, cleanses the temple, and the next morning he finishes the story of the fig tree. He does this intentionally so that you see that these two stories are connected and to help clarify what is actually happening. So in this time of the year, on the fig tree, in the Middle Eastern fig tree, actually bore two types of fruit, two types of delicacies. They would grow figs, which, if you've ever had one, are delicious. Or, in this time of the year, the branches hadn't produced the fig tree yet, but they would produce these little nodules, which were all over the place. They were abundant and tasted very good. So what would often happen is that travelers liked to pick them off and eat them on their journey. So if you found a fig tree that had begun to sprout, that should have those nodules on them, and there's none there, it'd be a cue that something's actually wrong with this tree, that is not going to be able to produce figs, that is not going to be able to do what it's supposed to do. It might look beautiful from a distance. You might be on your way there and say, oh, gosh, those are delicious. Those might just give me a little something, energy, sweetness as I go onto my path. And you get up close and you really see the tree is not beautiful, it's dying. See, growth without fruit was a sign of decay. Growth without fruit was a sign of death. Jesus is simply pronouncing that which is already true here. So what is the lesson that Gospel of Mark is trying to teach us, Jesus here? That Jesus finds a tree not doing what it's supposed to do. And he sandwiches it with the cleansing of the temple. He's supposed to go to the temple. It's called a house of prayer. And you know what no one is doing? No one is praying. No one is actually doing what they're supposed to do. Consider this. A church can be full of people doing church activities and yet do them without any real heart change and without any real compassionate involvement with others. I can come up here, prepare a sermon, preach it with never having prayed throughout the process. And yet here, Jesus, again, both exceeds expectations and flips them on their head. For he is able to see both the heart and the people involved. Right? And so, how does this connect to us? Right? Because I think sometimes I lead poorly in prayer. I think sometimes I'm like, I'm so busy with life. Maybe you felt this. I'm so busy in life that I forget to pray. Or maybe I just like how things are. The temple is so beautiful. The church is so beautiful that, man, it must be flourishing. We got people here. The church must be healthy. But that's not always the case. Just because people show up doesn't mean that something is good. Now, I don't see this happening here at FCC too much. Maybe I'm just very positive. But sometimes, in theory, we want more people to come to FCC, right? And we want them to be here so that they are changed. We want to be changed by the gospel. And John talked about change at the very beginning, and we sometimes want change in theory, but in practice, we don't want it. Because it might not fit the way that I want church or I want my life. This might be in regard to the people that come to FCC, because we may not like them. Right? We're going to live in a small town. There's some people that we butt heads with. Or maybe as we think about the building, we may not actually like this building, or we may not like the other building. And it's going to change, even if in theory I want that to happen. As I thought about this, I thought about when I was in high school. I've shared this story many times, but I believed in God, but there was not much life there. And so my friend Cody invited me to a Bible study at his youth pastor's house, which was perfect because I was neighbors with the youth pastor. And so he started inviting me. I started going, and it was awesome. I started to see who God is. And I was like, wait, if this is who God is, I'm not living for him. I'm just kind of giving him my Sundays. I'm just kind of giving him my Wednesdays. But if God is the God of the universe and he's really the crucified king, I need to give him all of me. And there just became a purpose and a sense. And I was like, yes, Lord, yes. And that was probably the end of my sophomore year of high school. And I started growing. I was able to read my whole Bible one year, my senior year of high school, and it was awesome. I was doing good. My life had purpose and meaning. And that same friend, Cody, was very good at inviting friends. And we'd have youth group, and it was always Sunday nights. It was so much fun. And there was one time we were encouraged, like, hey, invite friends. Just remember to invite your friends. And so my friend Cody invited this girl named Marissa, who was probably in the same kind of boat as I was. And she came one time to youth group, and I was like, in theory, I'm so glad Marissa's here. But in practical life, I was like, yeah, she's like throwing off the vibe here, Cody. Like, I really like youth group, and it's just a little bit different. And so she came like once or twice, and I remembered after like the second or third one, I was like, I really don't want her to be here. And I had that thought, and I was like, why don't I want her to be here? Like, I want her to have the same purpose and vitality and love for the Lord, but yet it's changing my youth group time that I look forward to so much that I kind of don't actually want her to be there. I was thinking that if I just kind of kept my group the way that it is, then everything would be perfect. But if you were in the book study maybe last year, we did a book study on the book called Made for People. It's about the importance of friendship. And he talked about this very thing. And he said that when you add people to your group, you may be losing something in the past. But you are gaining so much more than you could have ever imagined. You're not making less friendship, you are making more friendship. You're making more love, even if it's different from what you had or what you expected. And the temple here is clean. It is pristine. It would have been wonderful. We got kind of images of what it would have looked like, and it's majestic. And yet it was only whitewashed tombs with dead souls inside. With nothing there. There needed to be a cleansing. So Jesus flips over these tables, tries to clean it out. And so Jesus exceeds expectations and saying that this temple is full, but it's not full in the right way. There is perfection on the outside, but death on the inside. And he's saying that will only lead to destruction. So he exceeds both expectations and flips them on their head, not only in his kingship when he comes, but in his cursing of them, but finally also in his cleansing of the temple. For when Jesus enters the temple, he's entering into the largest section of the temple. Remember, we don't have a great temple vibe for our church, right? You maybe think about it like the kids' area is where everyone kind of gathers. And in the temple, there would have been this large outer court that everyone could come in. Jew, Gentile, believer, non-believer. But as you got closer, there was an inner court, and then that was limited to only certain people, and then there's the holy place, and then there's the Holy of Holies, and it just continually narrows down. But here, where Jesus is on the outer court that was meant for the nations. And what we would have found is a market going on with craziness. An ancient historian once estimated that on one Passover week, 255,000 lambs were bought, sold, and sacrificed in a single week. So it's crazy, it's mayhem. You can almost think about it as the New York Stock Exchange, where everyone's yelling, trying to get prices at different things, but just add livestock to it. All right? An absolute crazy situation. Don't lose your kids situation. And he says, can you imagine the loudness? Jesus says, this is supposed to be a house of prayer. A house of prayer, what? For all the nations. And yet, within some Jewish understanding, it was popularly believed that when the Messiah, the Christ, comes, he will actually purge the temple of foreigners, of the nations. But instead, here, Jesus is clearing the temple not to get rid of the Gentiles, the nations, but he's clearing it for the Gentiles. He's acting as an advocate for them. And he's angry. He's angry because they have taken the good things of God, the good things of his kingship, and subverted it in the worst possible way. And if we're honest, some of us love this story of Jesus being angry, as a vindication for our own anger. Maybe someone say, it's okay that I'm angry at this thing because Jesus got angry and he threw over tables. Yet what is often the difference between Jesus' anger and my anger, far too often we get angry at people who don't do what I want them to do. Jesus got angry because others were desecrating the glory of God and making it difficult for people to worship him. We get angry because of our inconveniences, while Jesus got angry because of our blocking people to God. Jesus is righteous and we are not. So whenever we do get angry, maybe it is for a right reason. Maybe we see someone getting hurt and we have a righteous anger toward them. But no matter our justification, our feelings are always intertwined with sin. Even if we primarily have righteous anger, there's always a hint of self-righteousness that probably says, I would never have done that. I point this out to say that, not to say that you can never get angry, but to say that your actions that flow from your anger are likely tainted by sin. You do not get to justify your sinful actions because you may get angry for a justified reason. So how does Jesus exceed expectations and flip them on their head in this cleansing? We see this most clearly in his perfect cleansing. The King of the universe who wears a crown of thorns on the cross as he pays the debt of those who put him there. We worship a crucified king. Maybe you've only ever seen one side of Jesus. Maybe you've only ever seen the side of Jesus, the angry Jesus. You love this image of him flipping over the tables. But here, you get to see Jesus that comes as a king mounted on a donkey, humble. If you've only ever heard of the king of the angry Jesus, then hear these words of Jesus where he says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." If you've only ever seen the kind and loving Jesus, and he's made out to be a God that would never call out your wrongdoings, see this angry Jesus on those who disobey and cause others to stay away from God the Father. Jesus is the true and strong king that will come in power to right all wrongs. He will not only flip over tables, but he will cause you to wither away and be forgotten, which is true justice on those who are against him. Jesus is able to hold both